The introvert, they are the ones that bring so much to the table as far as knowledge and being able to be deep thinkers. Extroverts are great at the business side of things when we have to sell things. Oftentimes, that's when I bounce back, is when I need to sell an idea that all of us introverts have that we want to do. And that's one of the skills that I have grown in my career is I've become the technical salesperson.
Hi, I'm your host, Larry Guthrie, Director of Content Strategy with Society of Women Engineers. Welcome to Diverse, a SWE podcast. I'm here live in the We25 Diverse Podcast Studio on site at SWE's annual conference in New Orleans. It's an exciting time, a great city, great group of people. The energy is just incredible. For those who are missing out this year, I hope you join us next year. It's definitely one to remember. In this episode, we are going to be exploring a topic that resonates with so many people, especially in engineering and technical fields. It's how introverts can embrace their strengths and thrive in an extroverted world. And joining me today is Julie Daugherty, an engineering associate and process project leader at Corning Incorporated. Julie has built an impressive career in manufacturing, and she's here at We25 leading a session on exactly the topic I started with, how introverts can unleash their career superpowers. Julie, this topic, it affects everyone listening, whether you're an introvert or you manage introverts. I can't wait to dive in. Welcome to Diverse.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk today.
Yes, me too. To start off, could you introduce yourself and share a bit more about your background in engineering and tell us, most importantly, do you consider yourself an introvert, an extrovert, somewhere in between, and how do you define those?
Hi, I'm Julie Daugherty. I have been working in manufacturing engineering for almost 20 years now. I graduated from Penn State with a chemical engineering degree in 2006, so that dates me a little bit. But I started working after graduation in paper manufacturing. So a paper mill is really where you can be thrown into the world of manufacturing pretty quickly. And then in 2008, I was actually married and moved to the New York area, which is how I started my career at Corning. I've had the opportunity to work in our plants all over the world. So I have put in equipment in China and in Europe and Germany. Really can say that I have friends all over the world because of being an engineer and working at Corning.
That's a great work perk, I would say.
I've gotten to see so many different things that I would have never seen otherwise. And I know you asked, I am definitely more introverted than extroverted. Mm-hmm. I think starting after college, I was really highly introverted, probably the 80 to 90% range. Mm-hmm. And through the course of my career, I am more of a moderate introvert. So a lot of times in your career, you have to be extroverted to share ideas and influence in the workplace. And that's where I have learned a lot of different strategies to be able to do that well.
So it sounds like there's hope for us, what we want to think as hopeless introverts. It's a muscle we can build. We can be more extroverted.
Yeah, and it's really something that you just need to know that being introverted isn't a negative thing. You don't have to change. It's just really being able to use your skills and being able to be effective in what you're working on.
Yes, like you said, it's not that one's better than the other. They both have their strengths. So what are some strengths that introverts tend to bring to the workplace?
The big ones that I say is deep thinking and focus. So introverts are usually described as quiet strength, and that is what they bring to the table. So really looking at things holistically, really good problem solvers, and just great at knowing what is going to be impacted and how everything fits together.
That makes sense. Do you have any stories in your career where you've seen those introverted qualities kind of turn into that superpower that you talk about in your session?
Yeah, so in Corning, we have roles that are called core technologists, and those are typically the people that have been working in their fields and in their process areas for 10, 15, 20 plus years. And they are typically the quiet people in the room, but they also are the ones that as soon as they say something, everyone stops and listens to what they have to say. Because they may not be the loudest, they may not be the most strong in the room, but their presence is their technical abilities, and that is what they bring to the table. So when I saw that within the career paths of what you can do, there are so many things that you can excel in as an introvert.
That makes a lot of sense, too, that when somebody doesn't speak that often, you instantly know there is purpose.
Much more impactful.
Yes, exactly.
And yeah, when you are around those people, and especially the scientific community, and we employ so many postdocs at Corning, and like the amount of knowledge that we have is incredible when you see that they don't say much, but when they do, everyone listens.
Now, is that also akin to, they say when you want to have people really listen and pay it, it's like when you speak softly, it's not necessarily the loudest voice sometimes, It's that soft voice that gets the attention.
Speak softly and carry a big stick.
Yes.
That's a really good analogy for me. I used to be called an atomic bomb when I would be in meetings when I was younger. I wouldn't say much, but when I did, it was blowing up everything that was being talked about. I don't know if I like the connotation of that, but...
big and powerful and just transformative. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And before we get started too deep into this conversation too, I did want to unpack a couple other things. We talk about this more as a binary type of thing, introvert, extrovert, somewhere on the... But there's also the ambivert and ambivert that I know you had spoken of as well. How does that play in the sandbox when we start talking more deeply into the subject?
Yeah, so an ambivert, what I have learned is that there are people that can do extreme swings between being an introvert and an extrovert depending on the scenario. I think that would be a pretty amazing superpower, honestly, if you could swing like that. Mm-hmm. I think most people fall more into the ambivert kind of realm where you are kind of moderate in both aspects, and depending on what is needed in the scenario, you're able to adapt.
I can't help do this podcast and think of where I am in one of these. Maybe by the end of this podcast, I will have a decision for you. So let's talk a little bit more, and maybe that'll help. So what strategies do you recommend for introverted engineers? How you've had such a great career and continue to have such a great career. So let's pull from your own lessons. How can they thrive in their careers if they come into it introverted and think that's hamstringing them in some way?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do. The easiest one that I tell some of the younger engineers that I work with that are introverts is to plan ahead. So the more that you plan, the more confidence that you have in what you're going to be talking about. And to this day, I still live by this. If someone wants me to come and speak at a meeting or give insight into something, I will always ask for an agenda if they don't have one. And then I think about different scenarios about what they could be asking about, what type of things they're going to be asking. And I actually go through phrasing in my head sometimes as to how I would actually respond. Spontaneous conversation isn't something that's completely natural to me. So it's weird that I'm actually thinking about what I would say and how to say it to make it impactful. But the more you plan and think ahead, the more confidence you have in the moment when you have to reply. There's a lot of other strategies that I have. Like for me, conversation doesn't come naturally, as I said. So I like written communication as much as possible. So if someone requests what I think a good strategy would be, I will say, give me an hour and I will send you something in writing. It also helps to align everyone. So when you see it in written speech versus just verbally, it's another way to make sure all types of learners and personalities understand what you're trying to convey.
So it seems like that's actually a safer way. It kind of accommodates everyone.
It accommodates everyone, and it's easier for me to be clear versus if someone just comes up to me in the hallway and says, what do you think about this? My brain and my mouth don't work like that, and a lot of times they don't align well. And it's been like this ever since I was a kid, and you just learn how to adapt to what your strengths are. Another key thing that I tell people is to find an extroverted friend. So having an ally in your workplace, and the Grey's Anatomy reference is a person, like you have to find your person. So someone who will tell you when you're being stubborn, someone that will tell you just go out there and do it. And that is really what has helped me in my career. I call them my champions. So you find champions who are higher in the organization and who are extroverted, who will campaign for you. Because I am really bad at self-promotion, and that was one of the things as younger engineers, you don't know how much the politics and the aspects of the workplace, it should just be what you accomplish is good enough. But that's not really how things work. And having an extroverted buddy or friend is an easier way to make sure that you're promoted and can advance.
Yes.
without having to awkwardly bumble through it yourself.
So shameless self-promotion is not necessarily your friend.
No. And I see extroverted peers that can just do it so seamlessly, and I am in awe of them, because when I try, it just is really sad.
So, I'm thinking about where we are right now. There's about 15,000, 13,000 people here. And a lot of this is about connecting with others. And you talked about if you can get an agenda and can you practice. So what do you do for the dreaded networking mixer where you have neither an agenda nor can you practice?
I call that mandatory fun, which is...
Nice reframe. Nice reframe.
And it's one of those things where I just have learned how to do it. Networking is so important in your career, and it's something that emotionally drains me, but I've learned strategies of how to talk to people. A lot of times people just come up to me. I think it's the pink hair, but it works out okay. The biggest thing that I tell introverts is don't feel like you have to be in that environment forever. Go find a quiet space, go recharge, and then go back in. And it's a great method. I used it yesterday when I was in the career fair walking around, and it was just too many people. So I left and sat and found a chair upstairs and recharged for 15 minutes, and then went and met some of the younger engineers.
It's like a round of boxing.
Yeah. But again, it's just knowing that it's fine if that is what you need to do to be effective.
Before you walk into a career fair, is there something that you tell yourself or some tip that you remind yourself of? Or how do you steel up for this? Okay, I'm going in, I'm going to have mandatory fun. Larry, if I'm talking to myself, because I sometimes struggle with this myself, Larry, this is what I need to remember when I walk into this insane career fair. Which, hey, here you go. Shameless self-promotion for SWE, the largest career fair for engineers in the world. But that's daunting. It's amazing, but it's daunting. I see so many people lining up for that, and I have to think that some of what you're talking about is going through their head. So what can they tell themselves? They're about to walk in. They're having that little pang.
It's part of that planning piece. I was just going in there to go talk to people and see. I'm a gainfully employed person. I'm not looking for a job. We really wanted to see what the other companies were, what the groups were, and just talk to engineers, which is the whole point of being here. But what I like to do is the piece of that planning is what has helped me when I've had to go in looking for a job or needing to talk to people is I plan what I'm going to say.
Okay.
And if I know who I wanted to talk to at the career fair, I would have a snippet of something that company does, why I'm interested, and it would be a little 2-3 sentence speech, and it worked out perfectly for me.
Nice.
So I have been able to do that, but it's one of those things where I had an index card for every company, and I would read it right before I got in line so that I wasn't going to be fumbling over my words. And I would appear to be very confident and very good at spontaneous speech.
That is fantastic. And I'm sure you could do the same for those kind of pithy social kind of things too,
it's the
right?
Same thing, yes. Even when we have recognition dinners and things through my career now, I always have just topics in my brain of what I could be talking about, and just so that it's not awkward, because it can be if you don't really have topics in mind.
Well, and kind of circling back, it sounds like if there's not an agenda, you can create one yourself.
Exactly.
And if you don't think you can plan, you can.
Yep.
Quite well. So, you have your job and you're working within. So we've gotten past the career fair stage and that kind of, you're always doing networking, social.
It's always network.
You're not done. I guess the headline is, you think you're done once you have your job. There will be more networking in your future. So these are skills that you can grow with. But you're in your job, and of course you're working with introverts, extroverts, omniverts, ambiverts. The personality diversity, we're all about diversity here. With all of these different personality types working together, how do you see that personality diversity contributing to stronger teams or better problem solving in STEM?
Yeah, the introvert, they are the ones that bring so much to the table as far as knowledge and being able to be deep thinkers. When you're looking at innovation or looking at really deep problems that you're trying to solve, those are the skills that you want. It doesn't mean that extroverts can't do that too. Extroverts are great at the business side of things when we have to sell things. Oftentimes, that's when I bounce back, is when I need to sell an idea that all of us introverts have that we want to do. But you have to get funding and you have to get support to be able to do these things. And that's one of the skills that I have grown really far in my career is I've become the technical salesperson. And that's what a lot of my team reflects and has me do, because it comes to the point of where I say, just tell me what you want and I'll go try to sell it. And that is the time that I put on my extrovert hat and I go and try to get us funding or resources or time to be able to accomplish what we want to do.
It's all about not just diversity within the group, but it also speaks to how you were talking about you kind of, over time, you can kind of build some strengths in different areas. It doesn't necessarily change who you are, but you're just kind of learning some other skills, just like you would any skill, right?
It's the same
Yes.
as anything else. And it's not like I'm fully extroverted when I have to do that. It doesn't necessarily come natural to me, but I've learned how to, I call it like a performance. You think about it like being in middle school drama club, that you have to pretend like you are a bunny rabbit jumping around. You're just pretending that you are an extrovert, and that is what you have to be to sell things.
Smart, very smart. For a good manager, they see these introverts, if they're smart, they celebrate all the different diversity of what their needs. And how do you see, for anyone listening who kind of works and leads introverts, what's one way that they can better create a space for their colleagues to share?
It's really just making sure that they have a place to speak. So just because you're not the loudest in the room doesn't mean that you're not impactful. So what I like to do is I use a lot of different tools. So there's a thing called an affinity diagram. Have you heard of that before?
No.
So you get a bunch of Post-its, and when you have to brainstorm, everyone can write their ideas on Post-it notes. So there is no ownership of it. It's just everyone has a bunch of Post-it notes. And then what you do is you group all the Post-it notes into big ideas. So that is a way that when you have really severe introverts that don't even really like to speak, everyone can get all of their ideas out written on Post-it notes. And it's a really safe space for people that aren't necessarily going to speak out in a group, especially when you have a lot of extroverts around.
That's a great kind of group exercise. Say you're a manager and your introverted colleague has, they have a great idea. And you can just see it bubbling. You can see that look in their eye. Is it encouragement to that person? Is it them being almost an advocate for the introvert to kind of create space for them? What does that look like?
You try to create space, and it really just depends on the situation. So some of them, if it's a huge group, they'll never be comfortable speaking in that. So I really believe in the pre-meeting strategy. So if you have a really big meeting with a cross-functional group that you have to have, what I like to do is I usually get the technical people ahead of time.
Okay.
And what that does is it helps us to create a safe space. So we hear all of the timid voices, and then we collectively go back to the group as the technical voice. And that helps to bring out everyone's ideas as a collective technical representation of what we want to do to, like, say, the bunch of business people that we have to convince as to we want to do XYZ. And that's what I like to do. And the pre-meeting strategy is great in general for introverts, that if you know there's going to be something that is controversial or someone who's going to be confrontational, you may not want to meet with them ahead of time, but meeting with them ahead of time one-on-one and trying to work through that before you have to go to a broader audience is a way better strategy to work through that.
A good manager is how do you get the best out of your team, right? That's another strategy for the managers out there. Like, how am I going to get what I need from everyone and kind of have that space?
And really just champion them and their ideas. And that's what I try to do as a technical lead, is making sure that everyone knows where these ideas comes from, that they're not mine. Most of the time they're not. And championing my people is a part of what we have to do.
I'm sure it feels good too when they hear that their idea is out there. And that theme of planning keeps coming up, which,
Yes.
I mean, that's a lesson in life, really. Let's just be honest. It's not necessarily just for this, but I think that's a wonderful theme around this, is this kind of planning piece and that agenda piece and kind of planning out different areas. As you mentioned, like with our listeners, introvert, extrovert. It's not about turning an introvert into an extrovert or changing anybody, from what I'm hearing, right? It's more about how can they better navigate their work environment and their careers to achieve the goals that they've set for themselves. And how can managers identify and make space and make sure that they're uplifting and getting the most out of them and that they're getting their time in the spotlight in their own way, because I'm sure they probably wouldn't want the actual direct spotlight.
A lot of them won't.
But can we get indirect light? It's they're like a fern.
Yeah, there's
right?
a lot of ways to get indirect light.
Yes.
And it's about knowing people's currency, is what I say to people that are managing as well. So you need to know what motivates your people, and then make sure you emphasize and leverage that in their recognition of what they're doing.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up today, do you have any closing thoughts or advice for introverted engineers listening who want to embrace who they are, but then grow that confidence a little bit? What's that first step that you would give them?
The first step is really understanding what your strengths are. So you may view yourself as insanely introverted, but you're really not. You have strengths that are extroverted as well. And it's really just knowing what strengths you have, knowing what weaknesses you have, and then either learning how to work through them or around them to be effective in your career. And the other thing I always recommend is get a mentor, get a champion, get someone who you like how they manage or how they work, and really get to the point of where they become your mentor and coach. And then you will start to mimic what they do, and you will start to gain all of those characteristics that you envy. And that's really what a good mentorship relationship is.
Sage words. Thank you so much, Julie. Before we close out, I would be remiss if I did not comment that it should have occurred to me at the very beginning of this, but the fact that you presented a session being an introvert yourself had to be quite the challenge. So
yes,
it sounds like you used all the tools that you just talked about to empower you and enable you to get on that stage and really share some much needed expertise.
Yeah, and I really encourage people to push themselves out of their comfort zone. So this is not something that comes naturally. Even speaking on this is not something that is natural to me to do a podcast. But I like to challenge myself and learn these skills. And it takes a lot of planning, as we've been talking about with the theme. But with planning and practice, anyone can do this, and it's a great opportunity.
Amazing. So we gave you some tips to get started. And then we gave you some little advance. So we got a little 101. And I think we're clearly what she did today and some of the tips around that. We're in graduate work there. But I think it's hopefully some really helpful practical tips for everybody out there to kind of find some opportunities to grow and kind of give them the courage and the strength and tools to do so. So a double thanks to Julie, not only presenting a fantastic session here at We25, but also joining us for the podcast here. Great tips, and hope everyone got a little something out of those.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.
I'm Larry Guthrie, live at We25. From all of us at SWE, thanks for listening.